we're going to be interviewing Jake Newby with We Sell to talk about email advertising and how it affects paid media as well. So, welcome, Jake.
Yeah, thanks, man. I'm excited to talk and talk about all things email and ads and everything related with that.
So, you're from Idaho, but I believe you went to school in San Francisco studying photography and videography. So, how did you end up doing email marketing?
Yeah, it's a bit of a leap around. It's not definitely not like directly related. So I did go to school, San Francisco State, for cinematography and photography. And when I was in school, I actually had my own like wedding video production and photography business. And that's like pretty much the majority of what I did to put myself through school was with that business. In my sophomore year of college, I was basically on YouTube, like most people, most college people that are looking for ways to make money online, and discovered the world of e-commerce and actually drop shipping. And then the first year and kind of the first store that I made ended up doing really, really well, like back then. And so the first store I made ended up doing like 350,000 in revenue in the first year. And then I was like, no, I never want to take photos again. Like my whole life is going to be e-commerce because this is crazy. And so I got super into media buying, and then sourcing products and all that and building out different stores. But the one thing that always kind of kept coming up was we would spend money on ads to acquire customers, and algorithms would change, like platforms would change. We'd get ad account bans, we'd get um, different suspends, like for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And we were like, man, like, really the one place that we can have control of is our email list. And so knowing that, that's just where I decided to double down. Like a few years ago, I just decided like, hey, email marketing, like I think this is going to be the future. I think it's really good to do in tandem with paid media. And there's just like ownership here that you don't get elsewhere.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So, correct me if I'm wrong because I don't know a lot about this, but it seems to me that like email marketing of like re-engaging like a list, is that a totally different ballgame from cold email outreach to like prospect to people?
Yeah, it really is. So, I mean, the similarity there is obviously it's both email, but
Yeah.
in the way that most like e-commerce brands are doing email, it's completely different than like a B2B approach where you're doing cold email and trying to, pick up a new client or something like that. With the way that we do things, it's very much so like customer retention based and getting people, it's like remarketing to get people to come back and buy from your brand and buy products from your brand.
Yeah.
Where cold outreach is like, hey, I have this service. You are my ideal customer profile. Like, can I sell you this thing even though you don't know who I am? Like, it's just kind of strictly offer based, where what we do is retention. And it's like, hey, you've most likely already bought from our brand, or you're familiar with our brand, or you came in through a paid ad at some point. Like, this is what we do. This is what we kind of stand for. This is our mission. This is our product. And we want to serve you this product.
That makes sense. And so, in terms of how ads work in tandem with like re engagement type email campaigns, it seems like the ads are for like the initial acquisition. You can do some amount of retargeting, but it seems like the retargeting is more effective and more under your control with these re engagement campaigns once you get the people from ads. Is that kind of your perspective on it?
Yeah, so it's actually interesting because I was having a conversation today actually, and someone asked me to like break down what automated flows do versus like what campaigns do, and like how I broke it down was like, okay, if you're an e-commerce brand and you're spending X amount of dollars on paid media spend, there's a certain percentage of people who are coming from that spend that don't convert right away, or maybe they don't. Sorry, dude. I keep
Eh,
getting
no
slacked.
problem.
Sorry. Do you want to ask me that question again and then I can like restart?
Yeah. So in terms of, I think it was like you get the people from the ads initially, and then you re-engage them with email. But I think maybe another part of the question that actually missed the first time is that you can get people into the like re-engagement or even like drip campaigns with people who just like sign up for some offer with email and don't even pay you anything yet, and then you get them to like get warmed up to that point with email. Is that kind of your perspective on it?
Yeah, yeah. So there's really kind of like two buckets how I think about email marketing and what we do and how it kind of plays with paid advertising. It's like on the front end you have like your flows, and then on the back end you have like campaigns, right? So on the flows side of things, as it relates to the question that you just asked, you're spending all that. You're an e-commerce brand. You're spending all this money on paid media and getting people to your site. There's a certain percentage that, like you just talked about, number one, like they either just bounce and they don't buy anything, or they sign up for a coupon that they never use, or they abandon checkout or something like that. An email there really serves a purpose in trying to re-engage those people to convert, which directly then helps your ROI as a media buyer, right?
Yeah.
Because we're just basically another layer that gets those people to actually come through and convert. But a lot of times, like most of like what we try to focus on is the retention base. So it's like someone who has already purchased before, and how can we get that person to continue buying, and increase the LTV of a customer? Because again, that then feeds a media buyer and a media buying agency, and it helps with their acquisition instead of a lower LTV where there's maybe no email remarketing and you're not getting repeat purchases. You can spend less to acquire a customer, but if you have good email marketing, you're getting repeat customers and you're getting good retention. Then on the front end, you can afford to spend more to acquire that customer.
Yeah. And I'm totally on board with that. And I think I'm not sure, but this is what I've heard because I'm not part of this world where like with the super big brands that have like a ton of data from like decades ago, and they have like all this data on like email, like like what exactly are the LTVs, like email remarketing, like if we get somebody in, we can like activate them over the next like 5 years on average, whatever. And then because they have that data, they know that they can acquire a customer at a loss, and
Mm-hmm.
then and then they can just do that on a massive scale. And then when like smaller companies come in, they need to be profitable on like every purchase. And then that's an uphill battle because you just don't have the data that these bigger people have, so they can just like outbid you, get more people at mass, lose money for like a year, a couple of years, whatever, and then they're in the green, and they're in the green at a massive scale. So do you have any like exposure to that world, or is that like not even how it works at all?
No, you're 100% right. It's at the end of the day, like that's just like a cash flow issue. Like, the big companies that can afford to like spend money and lose money on someone up front purely for the sole purpose of acquisition because they know in the long run they'll make it back. Like that's the dream state to be in, right? But the reality is a lot of e-commerce brands that are not at those kind of levels, like they have to be cash flow positive today. And so, yeah, of course, they want to see a return, like the best return today or tomorrow on their ads as possible, what they're spending to acquire people. And so, for those people, it's like, yeah, then you really have to double down on saying, like, okay, on the front end, like, how do we stop as many people or as many customers who are coming to the website? How do we convert as many of those as possible through remarketing campaigns that you don't have to continue to pay for in your remarketing campaigns to acquire those people, right? Because then it's a more positive ROI overall.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense, and I think that applies. Okay, here's another question, and I could be wrong about. I think that applies to businesses where you have a high repeat purchase rate, but I'm wondering what are your thoughts then for in terms of like businesses where there's a lot of one-off type purchases? Is that something where like email marketing would not make sense, or you'd have to adapt it some way to have a different approach?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think that email marketing can make sense for everybody, but I think it is a different approach. So obviously, with high repeat customer rates, like um, email marketing is, that's really what we look for when we're starting to work with people. Like we look for that because we know, okay, if there's high repeat customer rates, then like we know that we can reconvert people, and the ROI is going to be positive overall. If you're in a game where like you're getting a lot of one-off purchases and that's kind of it, to be honest, like you should have email set up on the front end where like you are you're trying to capture again as many people as possible on the front end. But other than that, like we personally probably wouldn't work with those people too much, just because like in my opinion, like a stronger business approach is to try and get as many customers to come back and repurchase again, because the most expensive customer to have is the one that you're acquiring rather than to
Yeah.
re-engage someone that's already there. So that's kind of more of like a business problem in my opinion than anything else. Like, and there's creative ways of doing that. Like even if it is a one-time purchase, like we've worked with several brands that go that when we try and remarket to them, we just have to take different angles and say like, no, this is like, here's like this is your product, you already bought it, you love it, like here's a gifting angle, or like here's through email we're talking about like an ambassador program to get those people to go and spread the product for a commission to like their audience and things like that. You just have to get a little bit more crafty, but ideally for us it's like you really want people who are repeat purchasers.
Yeah, and I imagine also like the best case scenario is like you have a business where there's a lot of potential for repeat purchases, and then they just haven't like tapped into it yet. So you just like help them like unlock that, and then it's like
Yeah.
you know a huge like boost initially.
Dude, for sure. Like, I mean, if I could get every single client to be like that, that would be amazing, because it would just be nothing but like massive, massive, massive success stories. Because like that, at the end of the day, like that's the opportunity for email is like if you know, especially if you have like a consumable product, and I don't mean just like food, just like anything like skincare, hair care, anything that like you have to replenish over time, like that is such a good opportunity for email, because there's so many different segments and triggers that we have to be able to say like, okay, someone purchased this product and you know that that product lasts on average 35 days. We can then on day 21 start getting back into the cycle and sending those people messages, contextual messages and contextual emails about reordering or signing up for a subscription or anything like that. That's when those are the ones I love, because that's when email can really come into play and help.
And no, that makes sense. And taking it a little bit from the conceptual to the technical. So Klaviyo. So you guys use Klaviyo, right?
Yep, pretty much. And I'm just now starting to accept people who are using OmniSend, but for the most part, Klaviyo.
And so, how is Klaviyo like? I have so many questions just because this isn't my world. So, like, is Klaviyo like the gold standard? Is it the one that like everybody uses? Is it like the future like newcomer, or like how does it compare to these other platforms?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, Klaviyo is the one that I'm most familiar with for sure. Um, I would say it's the gold standard in terms of like what you can do from a list segmentation and a flow building perspective. The only thing, you know, we're Klaviyo partners. The only thing about Klaviyo is their pricing for especially for a lot of e-commerce brands is getting pretty crazy. Like it's getting pretty expensive, which is why I've started to look at OmniSend as well, which OmniSend is decent, but Klaviyo for sure. Like if I had to say like the two, actually, if I had to say the three biggest things that's like super nice about Klaviyo is the integrations, like with Shopify, WooCommerce, that type of thing. Also, obviously, creating like custom parameters and mapping custom parameters from a Shopify site or a site to Klaviyo is really easy. But at the end of the day, it's all about like the ability to segment customers and the ability to build flows for those segmented customers. In my opinion, Klaviyo just does the best job at that.
So that's interesting. So in terms of the segments in the flows, so the segments would be like people who haven't purchased, who have purchased like different amounts, and like, so that's how like the segments would be broken out, or like what type of products they've purchased.
Yeah, honestly, it could be anything. And so this was one of the things I was also talking about earlier today. Like, um, I think contextual marketing as a whole is probably like the future, and it will continue to be the future. But especially when it comes to email, like um, with email, it's a really unique kind of channel, because you can do things on the front end to get data out of people to then give them more contextual marketing. So, for example, like yes, an example of a segment would be like someone who purchased this product and purchased this product, or didn't purchase this product in the last X amount of days. but it can also be anything you want it to be if you're gathering the correct data up front, like in an opt-in. You can ask any questions you want, the user can input information, and you can identify groups of people based on what they input there or based on the actions that they've done on their website, like you were saying with what they've purchased.
Yeah, and I think that kind of thing is the future, and I think that that is probably what this like this series or whatever this is going to like talk about like more and more is yeah, like contextual is a part of it, but I think like marketing becoming more user centric, like client centric, customer centric, and then integrating everything together. So like we are doing a lot of like ad stuff that's combined with CRO, and then we use data from the CRO for the ads, and then it's like a feedback
Mm-hmm.
loop because then we
Mm-hmm.
can get data in terms of like what are people's like actual concerns, like how do they actually
Yeah.
think, and it's oftentimes very different from what we think it is, and then we work that into the ads, and then it's moving in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is like I think like the macro level for ads. I'm gonna see if this applies to email in your opinion. I think the macro level is like there used to be all these like small like technical like levers and things you had to watch and stuff like that. And it seems like with like AI and like platforms just getting better, a lot of those barriers are getting removed. So like the
Mm-hmm.
skill of like media buying is becoming relatively less important compared to the skill of like actual like marketing, like psychology, messaging, positioning. And I
Yep.
think that it's just like a way easier to like get those things like to people. Do you think that email marketing is experiencing a similar trend?
Ooh, that's a good question because like that's so true. Like media buying, I remember when I was in media buying, like in the early days, early for me, I guess not early days, but like 2016, 2017 is when I got into it. And like, yeah, it was like, oh, you want to like use Facebook CBOs at this budget, scaling at this day, and like you want to target this
Yeah,
specific
yeah,
person.
exactly.
And like I've heard like a lot of that stuff has changed now. And like, yeah, it's what you said. Like it's about positioning, actual marketing rather than like the technical side of it, and it's about creative. And so I think on the email side, I don't have a great answer to be honest. I think yes and no. I think yes, but not to the same extreme that like you see on the media buying side. I think marketing and positioning and your angle and creative is always important regardless of the what channel it is. Um, the one thing that I fall back on that I think is different is with email, you really have an opportunity to meet people where they're at in their customer journey.
Yeah.
So I think from a technical standpoint, that means you need to be more segmented. That means you need to use more first party data, which is a bit more technical. So from that perspective, I do think in order to have relevant messages, and I do think in order to have contextual messages, like you have to be a bit more technical on email than maybe you might be on the front end.
That makes sense. And I think it makes sense also that email has changed less compared to like the ad world because like there's all like the automation and stuff, but also something that makes it harder is like all this privacy stuff is becoming like more and more relevant, and it seems like that stuff doesn't affect email as much. It seems, and again I could be wrong, but like with ads, it's like the privacy stuff is like super annoying. It's like a big roadblock. I mean, it's important. I don't know. I feel like I should say that
Yeah,
because there's a legitimate counter argument, but for like my job, it
yeah.
makes everything so much harder. I think the
Mm-hmm.
equivalent for that for email would that be like the delivery rate and then making sure like you're getting into people's inboxes in terms of like a big speed bump that's kind of like difficult to get over sometimes.
Yeah, that's interesting. So actually, like, so iOS 15 came out, and now if you're on iPhone, there's a couple of things that happens. So now, when you sign up, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but when you sign up for apps or you sign up for different services online, you can now hide your email and basically set up like a forwarding email when you sign up to these
Hmm.
places, and then it like hides the email from whoever's trying to get your email, but then just forwards you the content. So that's one aspect. And like, to be honest, we haven't dealt like too much with any of that on the e-commerce side. The other thing they did is I don't know if you heard about like the whole open rate metric with iOS 15, but essentially
Mm-mm.
when iOS 15 came out, Apple essentially started to I don't know the technical terms behind it, but Apple essentially made it where the open rates were kind of irrelevant because they inflated it. So now anytime something gets sent to an Apple Mail for somebody that has this setting turned on, it comes back as they open the email. So from that perspective, like we're getting hit with some of the privacy type stuff too. The only difference is like so far it's only affected, in my opinion, like vanity metrics, which is like open rates, as opposed to where yours it's probably more like targeting and tracking conversions and things like that. So yeah, I mean, it really hasn't hit us the same way, to be honest. It's not the same, I suppose. We can still track conversions and all that because we're using UTMs and whatnot.
Okay, no, that's pretty straightforward. And yeah, I think that like UTMs are becoming more relatively important compared to before for the ad stuff, and I guess email too because it's all kind of playing together, and so it's really important to like see the whole picture.
Mhm.
I'm wondering, how does your email marketing approach compare to what the majority of people in email marketing are doing?
Yeah, it's a good question. So like the last like year and a half, and I'm sure you've seen this on the Facebook and ad buying like agency side, like I swear everybody and their mother has gotten into email marketing like in the past year and a half. And like, you know, it's one thing because I think for the vast majority of email marketing agencies that are out there today, now it's like what they send is kind of like one-off blast to big portions of their list, and it's like here's an offer, here's a discount code, like that's it, like
Yeah.
that's kind of the messaging and the approach. What we are doing and what we're shifting and trying to lean even more to again, like is the contextual messaging that I was talking about earlier. It's like, how do we make it to number one? How do we make it so that we're sending emails based on where people are at, based on the actions that they've done, but more importantly, like I was saying earlier, like using more kind of data points up front in our opt-in pages to collect more information on customers so that we know when we remarket to these people, like we're sending them information and products that they actually care about, and we're using messaging that like is crafted for them. And the reason why we do that is two reasons. Number one, because we think that there's higher conversion rates that come out because of that, because it is contextual. But then number two, it's going back to your question of like the whole spam rate or like deliverability. It's like people's inboxes are absolutely flooded. Like Black Friday, I literally got like 40 emails at like 10 a.m. on Friday. Like my entire inbox was flooded with just these different offers. And so if you aren't saying something in your email that a user cares about, like it is so easy now, especially in with Apple, to unsubscribe, to get out of lists and things like that. So what we try to do is we try to send those contextual messages because we want to continue to earn that customer being on our list every send that we do.
That makes sense. So, and I think that's similar to what's happening with ads in that the barrier to entry is lower, but the
Mm-hmm.
barrier of entry to be good at something is way higher because it's not a straightforward process of like tick all the technical boxes. It's like, yeah, the contextual stuff, you need to know how like people actually think, like what they need to see. It's like kind of messy and complicated, and there's not really like a lot of like set guides that you can go through. So it seems like, yeah, more people are doing it poorly and less people are doing it well, and it's probably going to become harder and harder for like less people to do it well. Is that kind of your interpretation of it too?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like again, I don't think this is like a channel specific thing. Like this is just you have a ton of people. There's a low barrier to entry to get into any of these things, but there's a high barrier to entry to like be a good marketer
Yeah.
because that comes with experience. So like at the end of the day, regardless of if it's like ad buying or whether it's CRO or it's email marketing, like that is the game. It's either like yeah, you can get into it and you can call yourself an email marketer, you can call yourself an ad buyer, you can call yourself a CRO specialist, but like being good at it, like takes time, experience. It's that higher barrier to entry that you were talking about that quite frankly, like a lot of people just like don't put in the time to want to do that, because it's a lot of times people enter the space and they're like, yeah, I'm going to start this thing because I can go and I can start making X amount of dollars per month. And like, that's the wrong reason to get into it in the first place.
Yeah, and I think like what a lot of people do is like, what is the maximum amount of money I can make spending the minimum amount of time doing something?
Yeah.
And so like what we do internally, and like Val can back this up, is like everybody, you got to spend like 5 hours a week probably learning. And so like, I can confidently say that we're better than the vast majority of people who do what we do. And it's not because we're like princesses and it's not magic. It's just because like put in the time to just actually like learn how to do stuff, connect with people who are actually like good and actually like know what they're talking about. And yeah, just spend like a ridiculous amount of time like learning and like accumulating knowledge. And you don't see it in the day to day, but like in the big picture, like you can quickly see, like, looking back like 3 months, like 6 months, 9 months, like
Mm-hmm.
the stuff I was doing, I would never do that now. I'd be
Yeah.
like, yeah, like, are you joking? But I
Yeah.
think the people who like, get in, they just do the minimum, like never try to improve, and they just like keep doing the same thing like forever. And with all this stuff changing all the time, like it's so hard to keep up to date with the changes. I think email probably has less changes, but like, I think you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, like, yeah, if you want to be in business or you want to help people on a long term, like, you can't afford not to be continuously learning. Like, at the end of
Yeah.
the day, that's all it is. Because otherwise, you may be able to sign a client or two here and there, and maybe it doesn't end up well, or maybe it does. But like, in 12 months when things change, or in 6 months when things change, like, you're gonna lose, your clients, and you're gonna be right back to square one. So if you get into the space, like, number one, it should be something you care about and you're passionate about. But number two, like, you have to be a student of it for sure.
In related to that, what capabilities are you guys focused on building out more and expanding into in 2023?
So for us, there's a couple of things. So the first one obviously is more contextual messaging, like we've been talking about. But the second one is actually, like, I've been really thinking about how brands measure ROI on email. And like, one of the biggest things that you'll hear a lot of times agencies pitch is like, oh, you should get your email marketing to 30% or 40% of your monthly revenue. Or like, that's their pitch, is saying like, we can come in and we can get you 30% of your revenue coming from Klaviyo. And I think a lot of times what that's missing is a lot of e-commerce brands look at that and they go, oh, this is great, because 30% of my business is now going to be email marketing, or 40% of my business is going to be email marketing. But what they don't understand is the world of attribution in that game.
Yeah.
And so when a lot of agencies pitch that, it's just the vast majority of that, like 25% of that, is like, of that 30% that they make up in your business, isn't necessarily net new revenue. It's just grabbing attribution a lot of times from what people do on ads or things like that, and they kind of frame it as what they're getting accounted for, right? So it's not really growing the business. So one of the things that like I'm really, really excited about and have been thinking a lot more about is like, how do we come up with a system to where we can show that the LTV of the average customer that's coming in is changing because of our email marketing? And I think that's a little bit different of an approach than most email marketers have, but that's an approach that e-commerce brands should like, because that is LTV of a customer is directly affects how much extra money is coming into your business, rather than saying like 30% of my business is attributed to email marketing, if that makes sense. So that's a big focus for us in 2023 for sure.
No, that makes total sense. And I think that like that's when you're dealing with somebody who's legit, is like when they like because like the people who are not legit, like they always have some kind of like offer or something like that, like will be 30% of your revenue, or for us is like you pay by lead, or like whatever. But then there's always like some huge pitfall with that. It's like you pay by lead, okay, like it's so easy to get leads, like are these people actually going to convert,
Yeah, yeah.
or like the percent of revenue, okay, let's just like make like twist around the numbers so that it like looks.
Yeah.
And so like it seems like there's a correlation with like people who have this kind of like scam, I don't want to say scammy mentality, but like guarantee result mentality, typically paint a much clearer picture, maybe because the picture in their head is much less complicated. There's just like less going on the
Yeah.
subject. And then when it's like more complicated and nuanced, it's okay to like tell people straight up, or at least I do. Like sometimes people ask like, "What can we expect?" And I'm like, okay, like I can't like promise anything. All I can promise is like I've done this like so many times that like it will get better, and we'll turn it into like a systematic way of getting better, and we'll understand what's going on. But I can't
Yep.
say like 20% better. I can't say like leads for $5. I can't say like this other stuff like these other people are saying. So I think
Yeah.
we're like super aligned on that.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like it's the problem is like it's not sexy to say what you just said. Like it's sexy to say like, yeah, we guarantee we're going to get you 30 leads or we're going to get you 10 leads a day or whatever it is. Like, and so when a lot of people do like cold outreach to get new clients or whatever, that's what they lead with. But it's exactly what you said. Like very, very needle in a haystack type of industry where like someone pitches that and then like that actually that actually gets delivered, and it actually gets delivered to the quality standpoint that the brand wants it to be. So no, I completely agree, but it is true. Like everything, there has like we have frameworks on how to do email marketing for e-commerce brands. I'm sure you have frameworks for like how to buy ads for e-commerce brands, but it positively affects everybody different to different degrees, and like that's where the nuance comes in, that like when you're trying to get a new client on board, like you it's not sexy to not be able to sell that. Like it's like we have this framework, we've done it for this many people, and like it's worked for this many people, and like we're going to work with your brand based off your specifics and your nuances to like get the best outcome possible. That might be a 50% bump, it might be a 10% bump, it might be a 25% bump. But it's something that we're going to continue to strive and grow and grow and grow. And yeah, most agencies in this space, unfortunately, don't kind of sell or have that kind of ideology.
And that may even be a good thing, because I feel like people who have that ideology, and then also like clients who have like those like expectations, hopefully they all just like clump together somewhere, and I just like don't have to deal with it. It's like
Yeah, for
sometimes I
sure.
wonder, like, is there a separate version of the internet for people who are like searching for things misspelled and then going to websites that are misspelled, and it's like a version I just like never have to see or like deal with, but they can like have it. So I think,
Dude, it's so true.
yeah, so I think like having this like messaging is good because then it like attracts the right people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, here's another question that I wanted to ask is, does Klaviyo do anything with SMS, or do you guys do anything with SMS?
Yeah, so we started doing SMS this year, actually. Klaviyo has, in the past 12 months, they've really started to go hard on SMS. Like, if you, I believe if you look at their website now, which I should probably check this before I say this, but I want to say SMS is actually, when you look at like klaviyo.com, SMS is actually now above email if you look at how they present it.
Hmm.
If it's not, don't quote me 100% on that. It might be right underneath it, but I remember seeing at one point they did a big launch this year about their SMS platform. And so I think it's something that like in the next year, they're going to really continue to lean on. Because before this, like you have Klaviyo as like your ESP and you're sending emails out and everything. And then people are using like SMS bump or PostScript in addition to Klaviyo. But to be quite honest with you, like I've really enjoyed using SMS inside of Klaviyo. And so I would always prefer to put SMS inside the same product as your ESP, because then you can even build flows that have email and SMS integrated in one and send people messages on the either on email or text messages, like where they prefer to be communicated with, in the same kind of flow. So yeah, it's something I think they're going to lean into harder in the next couple of years for sure.
That makes sense, and it makes sense in terms of like the economy of just doing that, like running ads on like Facebook and Instagram at the same time. But
Yeah, for sure.
speaking of Meta, here, like I just started thinking of this, so maybe this isn't like a fully formed thought, but
Mhm.
like Meta has Messenger and they have WhatsApp. Do you think there's some future scenario where they're doing like message style like ads into these platforms?
Yeah, so the closest thing today would be like on LinkedIn. You can do
Yeah,
conversational ads. Have you seen those?
yeah.
Yeah, so I really don't know. I don't know that space well enough to know if they would do that. I know that like you used to be able to run like chat bots like with ManyChat in Facebook Messenger, and
Yeah.
like the
Yeah, I remember
rules
that.
the rules a few years ago were a lot less strict than they are now. So that makes me think like no, maybe you wouldn't be able to. But then I also know on LinkedIn, you can run those types of conversational ads, and a lot of people do cold outreach and kind of send cold messages at scale with advertisements. I think they're called in mails. I think is what they're called on LinkedIn. So I could see it happening, but I don't know. I really don't know.
Well, whether it's that or something else, what do you think is the future of email slash SMS?
Man, I think it is the same drum that I've continued to beat of like of context. Like that's what I think it is, because at the end of the day, like if privacy, like if Apple and like different companies crack down on privacy, which at the end of the day, like my opinion, it's not privacy, it's just they want to hoard data for themselves.
Yeah.
But if they pitch it as privacy, like that means that when you're sending messages, like your customers and your contacts have to care about what you're sending, which means you have to be contextual, because otherwise, like if you get something, it's kind of like when you get something in the mail and you just get like a bunch of coupons in the mail or like junk mail or whatever that like has no application to like what you're doing or whatever, you just like throw it away. But like if you got something in your email that like, let's say you had a problem with like your TV broke last night, and the next day you got something in your mailbox that was like TV repair services or something like that. Like your chances of reading that at that specific time, given the context of your TV breaking the night before, like your chances of converting on that and your chances of actually reading that is like 10x, because it
Yeah.
actually applies to what your situation is. I think email, I think marketing across the board is going to continue to be like that. And as privacy restrictions begin to happen and continue to happen, and you lose more of those front end metrics like your open rates and things like that, being able to rely on the fact that your messages are contextual is what you have to do in order to back out to higher conversion rates and continue to convert customers.
And do you think that, like, related to the way things are going in the future, that there is a future where like AI generated like emails are like doing a lot of what you guys do now in terms of like writing the copy, like determining like when to hit people and all that other stuff?
Yeah, so we actually like our my copywriters actually already use copy.ai. So like today it's very much so like we put in like an idea or whatever, and then it spits something out, and then we have to like revise it a ton, obviously, to like
Yeah.
make it make sense. Who knows what it looks like, in the future? I think it's only going to continue getting better and better as time goes on. So I could definitely see a world where, especially like plain text emails are actually super underrated. Like, sorry for a side tangent, but they're super underrated. They convert really, really well and actually have decent click through rates if they're short and sweet in the e-commerce space. So I could definitely see a world where like a lot of that starts to get automated. And of course, AI can look at technical data and look at flow data and segment data a lot faster and a lot cleaner than humans can. So I could see a lot of opportunities for AI suggesting like, hey, you should do this, or you should segment this type of customer, or you should try to do this because these specific customers are worth this much that maybe you didn't see as a human.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And we use the AI stuff too.
Yeah.
And it's mostly just like, yeah, jumpstart for like getting
Mm-hmm.
ideas. Um, well, that is actually all of the questions that I had. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on or talk about?
Oh man, I don't think so. Nah, I appreciate the time, and thanks for all the conversation.
Yes, yeah, likewise.